The Cadillac Northstar V8. If you're into classic American engines, you've definitely heard of it, and probably not for good reasons. Today we're covering the complete story of General Motors' most ambitious engine project that turned into their biggest nightmare. Introduced in 1993, the Northstar was supposed to be Cadillac's answer to BMW and Mercedes-Benz. It was a high-tech, 295-horsepower, dual overhead cam V8 that cost GM over $1 billion to develop. On paper, it was everything Cadillac needed to compete with European luxury brands. But somewhere between the drawing board and your local Cadillac service department, things went horribly wrong. The Northstar became infamous for catastrophic head gasket failures that could turn a $50,000 luxury car into an expensive paperweight. We're talking about repair bills that often exceeded the car's value and a reputation so bad it's still affecting used car prices today. So how did one of America's most advanced engines become one of its most hated? That's exactly what we're going to find out. To understand why the Northstar exists, we need to travel back to the late 1980s when Cadillac was having what you might generously call a rough patch. And by rough patch, I mean they were getting absolutely demolished by European imports. BMW and Mercedes-Benz were eating Cadillac's lunch with engines that were more powerful, more refined, and more reliable than anything coming out of Detroit. Meanwhile, Cadillac was still trying to convince people that their 4.1-liter high-technology V8 was worth the aluminum it was cast in. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. The HT4100, as it was known, was supposed to be Cadillac's answer to fuel economy regulations. Instead, it became a masterclass in how to destroy customer confidence. With just 125 horsepower and the reliability of a chocolate teapot, it made Cadillac's once proud V8 legacy look like a joke. Customers were fleeing to German brands faster than you could say Deutsche Qualität. By the late 80s, Cadillac's market share was in free fall. The brand that once epitomized American luxury was becoming synonymous with disappointment. Something had to be done, and GM knew it. They needed an engine that could go toe-to-toe with the best Europe had to offer. They needed something revolutionary. They needed the Northstar. But here's where it gets interesting. GM didn't just want to match the Europeans, they wanted to obliterate them. They set out to create the most advanced production V8 in the world. And on paper, they actually succeeded. The Northstar project began in the mid-1980s with a mandate that was both simple and terrifying: create an engine that would restore Cadillac's credibility in the luxury market. No pressure, right? GM assembled a dream team of engineers and gave them a blank check. Well, a check for about $1 billion, which in 1980s money was enough to fund a small space program. The goal was ambitious: create a dual overhead cam, 32-valve, all-aluminum V8 that would produce more power per liter than anything BMW or Mercedes could muster. And here's where GM's engineers actually deserve some credit. They didn't take any shortcuts. The Northstar was designed from the ground up to be everything the HT4100 wasn't. Where the HT4100 was underpowered, the Northstar would have gobs of horsepower. Where the HT4100 was rough, the Northstar would be silk smooth. Where the HT4100 was unreliable, well, we'll get to that part. The engine that emerged from this development process was genuinely impressive. Introduced in 1993 in the Cadillac Alante, Eldorado, and Seville STS, the 4.6-liter 32-valve dual overhead cam all-aluminum V8 was a quantum leap forward for U.S. automakers. Initially rated at 295 horsepower, the Northstar V8 has been ranked as one of the 10 best engines in North America by Ward's Auto World. Think about that for a second. In 1993, when most American V8s were still using pushrods and making apologetic horsepower numbers, Cadillac dropped a 295 horsepower DOHC masterpiece that could rev to 6,500 RPM. It was like bringing a Formula One car to a demolition derby. The specs were mouth-watering: 4.6 liters of displacement, aluminum block and heads, dual overhead cams with 4 valves per cylinder, and a sophisticated port fuel injection system. It also beat out both Mercedes-Benz and BMW in horsepower per liter of displacement, fuel economy, and required maintenance. On the dyno and on the test track, the Northstar was everything GM promised it would be. It was smooth, powerful, and efficient. Automotive journalists were singing its praises. Cadillac finally had their European killer. What could possibly go wrong? For the first few years, the Northstar lived up to the hype. The first Northstar engine, RPO code L37, was launched in the 1993 Cadillac Alante Roadster and the Cadillac Eldorado. It displaced 4.6 liters and delivered 295 horsepower and 290 pound-feet of torque. Customers were thrilled. Finally, Cadillac had an engine that could make a BMW driver think twice. The power delivery was smooth and linear, the sound was sophisticated, and the fuel economy was surprisingly good for a big American V8. Car and Driver loved it, Motor Trend loved it. Even the notoriously tough European automotive press grudgingly admitted that the Americans had built something special. The Northstar quickly found its way into Cadillac's entire luxury lineup. The Eldorado and Seville got it first, followed by the DeVille and eventually even some Buick models. Most Northstar engines produce 275 to 300 horsepower, with power reaching as high as 469 horsepower in the supercharged LC3. GM was so confident in the engine that they offered it with innovative features that were practically unheard of in American cars at the time. The Northstar could run for 50 miles with no coolant, a party trick that impressed journalists and customers alike. It had sophisticated engine management systems, variable valve timing in later years, and build quality that seemed to finally match European standards. For about 5 years, everything was perfect. Cadillac sales were stabilizing, the brand's image was improving, the Northstar was winning awards and earning praise from all the right people. GM executives were probably patting themselves on the back, thinking they'd finally cracked the code. But in the automotive world, just like in horror movies, it's always too quiet before the storm hits. Around the late 1990s, Cadillac service departments started noticing some concerning trends. Northstar-powered cars were coming in with what initially seemed like minor issues. A little coolant loss here, a slightly rough idle there, maybe some mysterious oil consumption. At first, these problems were dismissed as isolated incidents. Every engine has a few bad examples, right? Maybe some customers weren't maintaining their cars properly. Maybe it was just bad luck. But as more and more Northstars hit higher mileage, a pattern began to emerge that would make GM engineers wake up in cold sweats. The symptoms were always similar. A ruined head gasket led to milkshake-like brownish oil under the engine's oil filler cap. The issues were then known generally as a head gasket failure, or the Northstar condition. And here's where things get really terrifying for Cadillac. It could happen at any time, generally with miles between 50,000 and 100,000, and was more a when than an if condition. It didn't matter how gently an early Northstar was treated or how often it was serviced. It was going to fail eventually in this catastrophic way. Imagine buying a $50,000 luxury car, babying it, following every maintenance schedule religiously, and then watching it turn into a very expensive paperweight just as you finished paying it off. That's exactly what was happening to thousands of Cadillac customers. But here's the really insidious part. The failures weren't happening immediately. If they had been, GM could have caught them during warranty period and fixed them relatively cheaply. Instead, the Northstars were failing just as warranties expired, leaving customers holding the bag for repairs that cost more than many people's annual salaries. So what was actually going wrong? The answer lies in a seemingly innocent engineering decision that turned into one of the most expensive mistakes in automotive history: torque-to-yield head bolts. Now, before your eyes glaze over, let me explain why this matters. In a traditional engine, head bolts are tightened to a specific torque specification and then left alone. They hold the cylinder head down against the block, maintaining the seal between them. Simple, effective, and proven over decades of use. The 4.6L V8 engine found in models from 1995 to 2005 were notorious for failure due to a design flaw involving the use of torque-to-yield bolts in the head gasket. Essentially, these types of bolts are stretched beyond their elastic limit upon installation, ultimately increasing wear and fatigue. Torque-to-yield bolts work differently. Instead of being tightened to a specific torque, they're stretched beyond their elastic limit during installation. The idea is that this provides more consistent clamping force and better sealing. In theory, it's brilliant. In practice, with the Northstar, it was a disaster waiting to happen. Here's the problem. Once you stretch a bolt beyond its elastic limit, it's permanently deformed. It can't spring back to its original shape. Over time, as the engine heats up and cools down through thousands of cycles, these stretched bolts gradually lose their clamping force. And when head bolts lose their grip, bad things happen. The Northstar's all-aluminum construction made this problem even worse. Aluminum expands and contracts more than iron as it heats and cools. So not only were the bolts gradually loosening, but the aluminum block and heads were constantly moving around more than in a traditional iron engine. The end result? One of the most significant of the Cadillac Northstar engine problems is a blown head gasket, which is common in cars across all years with the Cadillac Northstar. There are TTY bolts in the system. When tightened, stretch. When exposed to excessive heat, they can stretch too much and lead to catastrophic failure. When the head gasket fails, coolant starts leaking into the oil system, oil gets into the cooling system, and the engine essentially starts eating itself from the inside out. And fixing it? Well, that's where things get really expensive. If you thought the head gasket failure was bad, wait until you hear about the repair process. Unfortunately for all involved, the fix for a failed Northstar was not a simple matter. Unlike a traditional pushrod V8 where you might be looking at a $1,500 to $2,500 head gasket job, fixing a failed Northstar was like performing open-heart surgery on a Swiss watch while blindfolded. First, the engine had to be completely removed from the car. Remember, this was a sophisticated DOHC V8 crammed into engine bays that were never really designed for it. Getting the thing out required removing half the car's front end. Then came the real fun. The cylinder heads had to be completely stripped down, the old torque-to-yield bolts discarded because remember, they're one use only, and everything carefully inspected for warping or cracking. The heads often needed to be sent to a machine shop for resurfacing, adding more time and cost. The total cost for a proper Northstar head gasket repair typically ran between $4,000 and $6,000, and that was in early 2000s money. On a car that might only be worth $8,000 to $10,000, it was financial suicide. Most owners faced a horrible choice: pay more than half the car's value for a repair that might not last, or junk an otherwise decent vehicle. This created a vicious cycle in the used car market. Northstar-powered Cadillacs became toxic assets. Even if they were running fine, everyone knew the sword of Damocles was hanging over their head. Resale values plummeted, making the cars even less worth repairing when problems inevitably arose. GM wasn't completely oblivious to what was happening. As warranty claims started piling up and customer complaints grew louder, they tried several approaches to address the problem, some more successful than others. Initially, they tried to blame the failures on customer neglect. "You didn't change your oil often enough," they'd say. "You overheated the engine. You used the wrong type of coolant." While poor maintenance could certainly make the problems worse, it soon became clear that even meticulously maintained Northstars were failing. When the blame the customer strategy didn't work, GM tried some engineering band-aids. They revised the head gasket design, changed bolt torque specifications, and even tried different bolt materials. These changes helped somewhat, but they didn't address the fundamental flaw in the torque-to-yield bolt concept. Perhaps most frustrating for customers was GM's inconsistent approach to warranty coverage. Some lucky owners got their repairs covered under extended warranties or goodwill programs, while others with identical problems were told to pound sand. The company seemed to be playing warranty roulette, covering some failures while denying others based on criteria that no one outside GM seemed to understand. The automotive press started to take notice. What had once been universal praise for the Northstar began to turn into skepticism, then outright criticism. Consumer Reports dropped the Northstar-equipped Cadillacs from their recommended lists. Word of mouth among luxury car buyers turned decidedly negative. But GM kept building Northstars, kept installing them in new Cadillacs, and kept selling them to unsuspecting customers. It was like watching a slow-motion disaster unfold over more than a decade. To their credit, GM engineers didn't give up on the Northstar. The engines were revised for 2000, with coil-on-plug ignition and roller-follower valve gear for improved fuel economy and reduced emissions. They continued to refine the design, adding variable valve timing and other improvements. By the mid-2000s, GM had largely solved the head gasket problem. Later Northstars, particularly the rear-wheel drive versions introduced around 2005, were much more reliable. The company had finally figured out the right combination of bolt design, torque specifications, and assembly procedures to make the engine work as originally intended. But it was too late. The damage to Cadillac's reputation was already done. The Northstar was touted as a reliable and powerful engine in the 90s when it debuted, before the head gasket issues became apparent, and this can still be true if they are properly fixed. Just use caution when buying one and make sure you have the money to fix it, or are okay with selling. Even today, more than a decade after the last Northstar rolled off the production line, its reputation continues to haunt the used car market. Mention a Northstar-powered Cadillac to any informed car buyer and watch their face immediately change. It's like automotive PTSD. The irony is that when they worked properly, the later Northstars were genuinely excellent engines. They were smooth, powerful, and surprisingly fuel-efficient for their size. Power output. Depending on the model and year, the V8 engine delivers between 275 and 320 horsepower. This power comes from advanced fuel injection and optimized combustion processes. Torque. With a torque range of 300 to 315 pound-feet, the engine provides strong acceleration. But in the court of public opinion, the Northstar had already been tried and convicted. No amount of engineering improvements could overcome the years of catastrophic failures and frustrated customers. The Northstar's legacy extends far beyond the engine itself. It fundamentally changed how people viewed American luxury cars and played a significant role in Cadillac's continued struggles to compete with European brands. The rise of European imports brought the likes of BMW and Mercedes to the forefront of the market in the late 1980s and early 1990s. However, that was only one of Cadillac's issues. Its primary issue was their declining quality and attention to detail, which were the brand's foundational supports. The Northstar was supposed to fix that reputation problem. Instead, it made things worse. Customers who might have given Cadillac a second chance after the HT 4100 debacle found themselves burned again, but worse this time because they'd invested so much more money. The financial impact was staggering. GM spent over $1 billion developing the Northstar, then spent millions more on warranty repairs and legal settlements. But the real cost was in lost sales and damaged brand reputation, losses that are impossible to quantify but certainly ran into the billions. The Northstar also changed how people shop for used luxury cars. Today, savvy buyers have learned to research engine reliability before making a purchase. The phrase, "avoid the Northstar years," has become common wisdom in automotive circles, joining infamous engines like the Vega's aluminum block and the Oldsmobile diesel V8 in the pantheon of automotive cautionary tales. So what can we learn from the Northstar debacle? First, and most obviously, that good intentions and advanced technology mean nothing if you can't get the basics right. GM's engineers created a sophisticated, powerful engine, but stumbled on something as fundamental as keeping the cylinder head attached to the block. The Northstar also demonstrates the danger of rushing new technology to market. GM was so eager to compete with European luxury brands that they didn't thoroughly test their torque-to-yield bolt design under real-world conditions. A few more years of development might have prevented decades of customer misery. There's also a lesson here about corporate responsibility. When GM first became aware of the Northstar's problems, they had an opportunity to address them proactively. Instead, they chose damage control and blame shifting, which ultimately made the problem much worse from both a customer relations and financial perspective. The automotive industry has learned from GM's mistakes. Modern cylinder deactivation systems work reliably because engineers took the time to get them right. Advanced engine technologies are tested more thoroughly before reaching production, and manufacturers are generally more responsive to systematic problems, having learned that ignoring issues only makes them worse. Interestingly, the Northstar has found a second life in an unexpected place, the world of engine swaps and hot rodding. Enthusiasts who understand the engine's quirks and know how to properly address the head gasket issues have discovered that a well-built Northstar can be a formidable performance engine. The all-aluminum construction that caused so many problems in stock form actually makes the Northstar attractive for weight-sensitive applications. The sophisticated valve train can handle aggressive camshaft profiles, and the strong bottom end can support significant power increases with forced induction. Several companies now offer upgraded head stud kits and improved head gaskets that address the original design flaws. With these modifications, a Northstar can be as reliable as any other engine. It just takes a knowledgeable builder and a willingness to fix GM's original mistakes. It's a fitting end to the story, in a way. The engine that nearly destroyed Cadillac's reputation has found new life among enthusiasts who appreciate its potential while respecting its history. Sometimes redemption comes in unexpected forms. The Cadillac Northstar V8 stands as one of the most important cautionary tales in automotive history. It had everything going for it: advanced technology, impressive performance, and the full backing of General Motors. Yet it became one of the most reviled engines ever produced, not because it was fundamentally flawed, but because of a single engineering decision that turned a masterpiece into a nightmare. The Northstar story reminds us that in the automotive world, reputation is everything, and second chances are rare. GM spent billions trying to create an engine that would restore Cadillac's prestige, only to see it become a millstone around the brand's neck. Today, as we watch the automotive industry transition to electric powertrains, the Northstar serves as a reminder of the combustion engine's complex legacy. At its best, it represented the pinnacle of American engineering ambition. At its worst, it showed what happens when that ambition isn't tempered with adequate testing and quality control. Love it or hate it, the Northstar V8 was never boring. It was ambitious, sophisticated, and ultimately tragic, much like the American auto industry itself during those transitional years of the 1990s and 2000s. And that, folks, is the complete story of how one engine managed to be both the best and worst thing that ever happened to Cadillac. If you enjoyed this deep dive into automotive history, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because trust me, we're just getting started with the wild stories hiding in America's engine bays. And until then, I'll catch you on the next one.